welcome to our session today, Beyond the Numbers, a discussion on how diversity accelerates business results. And this is sponsored by the NC Education Lottery and Pathfinder Business Consultants. My name is Jay Graves, and I'm the founder of Pathfinder, where we help leaders build high-performing organizations through a culture of inclusion and diversity. And we know with the increases in social justice issues and the role of organizations can have in moving the diversity journey forward, we approached the NC Education Lottery to help sponsor a series of discussions aimed at sharing best practices and insights on how to evolve diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, and then ultimately in our society. I got to say the NC Education Lottery stepped up. And so I want to give a huge thank you and introduce Annette Taylor, the manager of Minority Business Outreach and is leading the lottery's diversity efforts. Annette, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jay. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for being here. On behalf of the North Carolina Education Lottery, it is my honor to welcome all of you to our first event of our 2020 Diversity Series. We just celebrated 15 years of fun while raising $8 billion for education in our state. We fulfill our mission of providing value and building a stronger North Carolina every day with a diverse set of stakeholders, our 230 employees, our players, our retailers and vendors, our community partners, and the education community. So we're delighted to partner with Pathfinder, and Jay has been an amazing partner just to bring you this discussion today and to hear best practices from our distinguished guests. So welcome to our panel members and welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. So back to you, Jay.
All right, Annette, thanks, and congratulations on those milestones. That's wonderful. So now I'm really excited to introduce this amazing panel. I can tell you that through my interactions, I can tell you that that you will not find a more passionate group when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We had a little get together yesterday, and I got to tell you that I walked away with so many great stories and great examples that I can't wait to bring them forward here. So first, I want to introduce you to Andrea Horn. Andrea is the Supplier Diversity Manager at SAS Institute and currently manages SAS's corporate-wide supplier diversity program, where she works to advance business opportunities for minorities, women, veterans, disabled, and LGBTQ business owners. Her supplier diversity advocacy began over 14 years ago in higher education, where she gained experience in federal small business subcontracting. Andrea has in-depth knowledge of supplier diversity management and constantly adapts her supplier diversity program strategies to overcome resistance to organizational change. So Andrea, welcome.
It is so good to be here. Thank you, Jay.
Absolutely. And next, I want to introduce Frank Suarez, Deputy Executive Director, Brand Management and Communications at the NC Education Lottery. Frank has more than 21 years of experience in the marketing and brand management field and 7 years at the NC Education Lottery. Prior to joining the lottery, Frank successfully led marketing, product development, and brand management in consumer packaged goods, restaurants, and the banking industry. This included working for industry leaders like Kraft Foods, Del Monte Foods, Darden Restaurants, and Yum Brands, which is your KFC, which I absolutely love a little too much, and Wachovia Bank. Frank has received multiple marketing awards and is a huge advocate for diversity in the workplace and has seen firsthand how it can help businesses thrive. So Frank, welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Jay. Very excited to be here.
And then last but not least, Jonathan Wilkins. Jonathan is a program manager of supplier diversity and also leads the U.S. Employee Research Group, or ERG, at Lenovo. As program manager of supplier diversity and U.S. ERGs, Jonathan administers all of Lenovo's supplier diversity and U.S. ERG efforts to support internal and external customer needs. He works closely with Lenovo's procurement and diversity and inclusion groups to promote these efforts throughout the organization. Jonathan's passionate about helping others grow and developing their businesses in order to strengthen the economic viability of individuals and communities in which we serve. Jonathan believes that it's business and it's personal. So Jonathan, thanks for joining and welcome.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you, Annette, for having us today.
Absolutely. Now, before I ask my first question to the panel, I want to make sure that this is interactive. So if anyone in the audience has any questions or comments they want to make, please feel free to use the chat function in Zoom. We're going to be monitoring that throughout the discussion, and we'll try to answer any questions or highlight any insights that are shared from the group. But let's go ahead and get started. So the business case behind a diverse organization have shown that companies and boards with more ethnic and gender diversity thrive compared to their non-diverse counterparts. Yet many companies still struggle. Andrea, I'm going to throw this one out to you first. Why is that?
Well, I'm going to highlight two things that I think is why companies still struggle. One being there's just no accountability. We haven't really had, not in the corporate world anyway, regulations, or we haven't. It's not best practice yet to share these things with each other. I think we're seeing that that's transitioning now, but we just haven't had to do it in the past. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we're just not hiring enough ethnic and gender diverse people, just plain and simple. So, with that statement, the next thing is, well, how do we remedy that, right? And this is, I think that you have to really put a system in place to grow and advance the people that you do hire. So, for example, at SAS, we have a career mentor protege program that's open to all individuals. So, once you're onboarded at SAS and have been there 2 years, you have the opportunity to then apply to have a mentor. And this is a mentor outside of your own department. So you've got connections and resources from someone else outside of your own organization or department. And personally, that has helped me immensely build relationships across the whole company. Now, another thing that I think really needs to happen, HR needs to re-examine their policies. Do companies have a diversity talent acquisition lead? Are we leaving names and addresses on resumes? Sometimes we don't need to see those things, right? Like if you're giving the hiring managers applications with names, maybe the schools that they went to or the communities that they live in, there's a chance that there could be, that the diverse folks are getting left out of the mix. So I think those are a few things that are holding companies back.
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to sort of build on some of what Andrea was saying. I think, and I've worked at some companies that are known for being like very, very diverse and sort of a leader there, and then the complete opposite. And I think one of the first things is that there may be tons of business cases out there, right? But a lot of folks and a lot of leaders sort of operate in this sort of, what does it mean to me? Like, show it to me, prove it to me. If it's not broken, why should I fix it, right? If the numbers are still good and I'm still making sales, why does it matter? That's not going to be the top priority. And I think you have to sort of work on that mentality, particularly if it's not something that they've sort of grown up in that culture of in that organization. And so I think that takes a lot of work. It takes sort of that being able to speak up to leadership, right, and bring that up. So you need sort of folks who aren't at the executive level to bring that up and sort of speak to leadership and be confident and able to do that. The other thing I think is that diversity is just so complex, right? And obviously, Jay, you know this because this is what you do, but it's such a complicated thing to understand. You sort of understand where you're from, but to try and understand sort of diversity in general, there's so many different types of people. There's so many different nuances to diversity that I think it sort of is overwhelming, and there's just a lack of expertise and knowledge on how to sort of even start to work on that. I've worked with very many different HR folks and, some of HR leaders, and it always amazes me the lack of experience that they have with diversity, and just how they just are also just not comfortable, right? It sort of pushes people into this very uncomfortable place. And so you have to really work on, how do we get folks comfortable, okay with being out of their comfort zone, and stretching them, and not worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing all the time, but also just thinking about how do we learn about it and sort of take those steps, those baby steps. And I would tell you, like here at the lottery, we, like Annette said, it's our 15th anniversary. 15 years may seem like a long time to folks, but in the lottery space, we're pretty young, we're pretty small. And from where we started to now be over $3 billion in sales, we grew really fast. Our organization has grown fast, and we're still working through, what does that mean? And how do you sort of make sure you make diversity part of the culture in every, corner of the organization? And so it takes time. And I do think it is going to be a struggle, and what has been a struggle up at the leadership level when there aren't diverse folks at the executive, suite. So you sort of have to really work from the bottom up and sort of make that case. And it's a challenge, but I do think that it can be overwhelming, and you have to try to figure out how to simplify it and make it easy, and find folks sort of like you, right, that can sort of provide some of that thinking and some of that experience, because there's really not a lot of it out there. I mean, what I've seen, given everything that's happened in the last year, with all the different movements and everything that's happening, you now have started to see all of these roles come up and pop up in organizations, right? Everyone's looking for a chief diversity officer or someone. There's not enough people out there who do it. I mean, the experience is just not out there. So, so folks are realizing that it matters, but I don't think they really know how to do it. And they're looking for sort of someone to help them along the way.
It's so true. So true. Yeah, it's a couple of things there. You're right. I mean, when I think about the people that I work with, they're nervous, right? They don't want to mess up. That's one of the things that I hear the most. And just by the positions of power and history and everything else, a lot of what I work with are white males, and they're wanting to lean in. They see the value and they're wanting to do something. But the biggest thing is, Jay, I'm a little nervous. I don't want to mess something up. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong term? Yeah. And that's where you kind of need those advocates. And one of the things I'll say that I think you guys really touched on is a couple of things. One, it's uncomfortable. Two, it's a journey. And three, let's be intentional. And four, actually, let's use insights. Let's see where you are and where you want to go, in your organization, which is where, Andrea, what I love about what you talked about is incorporating that into your leadership pipeline, into your mentoring. So that's a very intentional example right there of what you can do to start to spread that inclusion and that diversity throughout the organization. So next question then, some of the examples, I guess, what are some of the examples, that you've seen where having a diverse organization has helped? And opposite of that, do you guys have any examples of where it's hurt an organization? And Jonathan, I'm going to go ahead and throw this one out to you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ajay. I think diversity helps in so many different ways. There's so many studies out there that reference that having executives having quite a few executives or top ranking officials inside an organization helps to improve the bottom line of the organization. So we can all see that the studies are there, the numbers are there. It's proven. We just have to go out and implement it, right? And I think that's the difficult part, getting people to say we're going to do these things. And it goes back to what Frank was talking about, getting outside of that comfort zone. You have to step into the arena and say, I'm going to make diversity a priority within inside the organization. When we see that not happening, even from the supply diversity perspective, let's take it to, I have a couple of examples. A few years ago, I think within the last 2 years, and it was a back-to-back scenario that happened at two different organizations. One was at Dove and one was at Prada. Dove created a campaign saying that our products are made for normal to dark skin. Well, obviously there was not a person of color sitting at the table when that marketing decision was made, because my darker skin, and I'm not the darkest of skin. My wife is much darker than I am. That's normal to us, right? So what's normal that you created in the mind of on the one scale of whiteness is still normal on the other end when it comes to darkness as well of skin tones. So you have to be very intentional about having someone in a position at the seat at that table to say, raise their hand and say, hey, wait a minute, this is not going to go well in the industry. And we can obviously see that there was no one sitting at that table. And then take it to another step. Prada, a very high-end luxury brand, made a key error when they put a miniature Sambo on the side of a purse. So that is a very negative caricature that has been portrayed through the Jim Crow era towards the Black community. The minstrel shows is what it came out of. So we it's very offensive to the Black community. We have to be cognizant of that. And there are many other things that have happened throughout history that organizations have had to take a step back and apologize for. So do you want to feel uncomfortable now and stepping out and adding somebody diverse to your portfolio, or do you want to feel uncomfortable when it affects your bottom line and those dollars start coming in because you created a negative campaign? And I can guarantee you Doug took a big hit in their campaign from that campaign that they put out to the market.
Man. Frank, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is a really, really big deal when it comes to when you think about sort of the examples that Jonathan gave, but just in my world in marketing and communications and product development, it really makes a difference if you have people on your workforce that reflect your player base or your customer base, right? Like you need folks that can connect and sort of see those perspectives. And I can give you sort of an example that happened here at the lottery. And back when I first joined the lottery 7 years ago, and I was very new, but I will tell you, in terms of my team, I was the only person that knew sort of any Spanish, right? So we know that the Latin population continues to grow, and in particular, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking folks. So we're working on a campaign for some scratch-off tickets. They're called jackpot tickets, and the campaign or the line on it was something around now you can hit the jackpot or whatever. And I remember this because it's just one of those that stands out to me all the time. So we're sitting in a meeting with the agency, creatives are around, and then my folks, director of advertising is there, and they presented sort of this point of sale material with the Spanish version of it. And I swear this was like my first or second meeting. So you can imagine just being in this room and the new person and the new guy, sort of head guy in charge. So everyone's trying to sort of be, on their toes and make sure that they set a good sort of perception from the beginning. So I get this image of this poster and I'm looking at it and I read it and I'm trying not to like show my face because, to laugh in front of a creative person is not a good thing to do. Like, this is their baby. This is their stuff. You don't want to like make them seem like it's bad, but I'm reading it and I'm thinking, okay. So then I sort of collect myself and I'm like, okay, in a very matter of fact way, I'm just like, well, when I read this, it says that in any moment you can touch the fat man. And it's like one of those things where you're just like, and they're looking at me in shock, right? There's no way. And the director of advertising is like, there's no way that says that. And I'm like, well, I'm not the best at Spanish, and we all have different types of Spanish. Anyone who's ever tried to learn Spanish, we throw different words everywhere, right? So we interpret things differently. I said, but I'm just going to tell you from Puerto Rico, that says I'd touch the fat man. That's what this sounds like. And they're like, oh, no way. And I said, well, look, is there anyone else in the organization that speaks Spanish you can run this by? Because I guarantee you I'm one person, maybe somebody else sees it differently or whatever. And so luckily in our customer services group, we have a wonderful group of folks that also speak Spanish. And so went down there, I said, let's go. Went down there, showed this first person. She starts to chuckle. And it's like, and my director of advertising is like, what? And she said, it says that you can touch the fat man. And so, we went around, but ultimately the reason that happens is that in Spain, so if you think about like, and we use a translation service too. So that's the thing too, is remember, you can use a translation service, but that doesn't mean that they understand all the nuances of what you're trying to communicate. And so, you know, in Spain, they have a big game, a big jackpot game that they call El Gordo. And I don't know how many of you know in Spanish, but in El Gordo actually means fat man. And so that's what it said on the poster was El Gordo. And also in Spanish, tocar is to touch. And so it said tocar el gordo, which, you know, sometimes they didn't really have a good translation for hit the jackpot. So you touch the jackpot, and it just became touch the fat man. So it just, you know, it was an interesting sort of learning of, you know, it sort of made me think, what has happened with the Spanish translations before I got here? Because Lord knows, nobody was sitting here understanding sort of the nuances. I can only imagine what posters said. But it just lets you sort of, it's one example. I mean, there's just many examples of, we look at advertising communication all the time in product development, exactly like Jonathan said with stuff. It's like understanding the nuance. You could take the literal translation of what you're trying to communicate, but it's like the cultural nuance of it needs to be understood, and you run the risk of offending, right? And so you really need these folks on board to sort of provide that filter, provide that perspective, because we just have so many blinders and gaps that we're unaware of. So anyways, that was just one example that I personally know of, but I've seen it everywhere I've been. And the most successful companies have a good diverse group of folks that they can sort of run things by, even if they're not on your team. You know, it doesn't hurt to just run something by someone just to make sure, if you know there's potential for any sensitivity or some interpretation, just let folks know, you know, just run it by them and see, just to make sure. And we do that now. And, you know, we're probably a little extra sensitive. We're a government organization. So, you know, every little thing, if something goes wrong, it doesn't just go to our customer service. It goes to the governor, it goes to state reps. So we try to be very sensitive about everything that we do, but it's definitely helped us that we have sort of a diverse group that we can sort of count on.
Andrea, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I definitely don't have an example that's as funny as Frank's, but
The fat man, we don't.
No, I don't have, no, but I do have one, and I like what Frank said about, you know, making sure that you have, you know, a diverse table or set of people on everything that you do. So one thing that comes to my mind, and this happened while I was at SAS, is so in procurement, of course, we have teams of sourcing managers, we have an IT sourcing team, we've got, you know, software teams. So when we need to procure something at SAS, it goes through these sourcing teams. And I'm not going to call out any products here. I'm just not going to do that. But so, you know, we had implemented this kind of corporate-wide system that helps us do some things. And a few weeks after it's implemented, you know, several people come back to us and says, well, this isn't accessible to me. And these people had sight disabilities, you know, so, and it was coming from, we have an accessibility software team at SAS that makes sure our software is accessible. So for us to not kind of pass that through them was a huge learning, you know, point for us. You know, they don't necessarily, you know, they don't have to do much. We just have to shoot an email and say, hey, can you take a look at these specs? Are you going to be able to access and do the day-to-day things you need to do within this system? So, you know, we're talking about diversity. We've got to keep in mind, you know, all mental abilities, all disabilities as well.
Yeah, big time. There was somebody that I was working with in the kind of sales and marketing arena, and they were prepping for their sales meeting, and I was canvassing some of the employees and talking to them about their experiences, and we were kind of going to be doing some culture work there. And there was somebody that I interviewed, and they were on the autism spectrum, and so, you know, we talk about neurodiversity, right? And they were saying how, you know, that week was a week that created a ton of anxiety for them. And if anybody's ever been to, a sales meeting or a sales kickoff, it's usually high production, right? If you're in a big organization, and can be very intense. And one of the things that we did by highlighting that was we completely remapped the color scheme, how we did the volume. We recreated a remote room so that if you didn't want to be in the room with, the 200 people, you could go be in a smaller room that was more spread out, quiet, dark. We did a sensory room. We had sensory devices out. We had all these different things. And it was the highest rated sales kickoff that they had ever had. And I got to say, there was a lot of pushback from the commercial leaders. And I come from a sales and marketing background, so I knew what they were talking about. They wanted the glitz, the glam, and they were like, this is going to be the most boring sales kickoff we've ever had. And it rated so incredibly well. But, without really having that understanding and thinking of diversity, not as just, okay, what's the demographic that I think I can see in this room, but what are the other areas of diversity, right, that we can think about? You can really start to get that kind of holistic look, excuse me, and plan. So we've got, allergies just decided to kick right in during the middle of this recording, as always, and I'm just waiting for my dogs to start barking. So I have to share that, these are kind of those extreme examples, right? And I think it really reinforces and proves why it's good to have a diverse slate. I think Frank, you and I were talking about, with our marketing backgrounds, when I first became a sales director, I was brought in to a marketing meeting, and I worked for a diabetes company, and they were getting ready to launch a product. Our biggest competitor, you may have seen it, used to use BB King as kind of their point person, and they used, Jazz and everything else. So if you know anything about diabetes, it really hits the Black, Latina, Hispanic populations, right? And so I go in this room and they run this jingle. Everybody's excited, and the jingle was like really, really jingly. And I said, I that doesn't speak to me. I don't think that would speak to my family. And who here has diabetes? And nobody in there had diabetes. And I, of course, was the only person of color in the room. And I was kind of put to the corner. They were like, Jay, look, your sales, I hadn't been in marketing yet. Just go sit in your corner. Well, they launched the product, and on social media, it got absolutely slayed, big time. And so I think, these examples just kind of really reinforce where not having the representation can really, hurt your business. And, Jonathan, I think you said it best in that, do you want to have that uncomfortable conversation in that room, right? Frank, like you said, there was a product manager in there and they hated my guts, right, for saying that. But do you want to have that conversation there or with your customers, right? So what, though, would you guys recommend if you don't have a diverse slate yet? Some of the companies that are out there and some of the folks that are listening in here, they may not be at that point in the journey, but they get the importance of that. What are some ways that they can reach out to, organizations, or how can they get that diverse voice in the organization while they're still building their plan? And I'll just put this out to the panel.
Jay, I'll take that one. One of the ways that I think that can happen is you have to be very intentional about recruitment and retention of talent. And what are you doing with that talent? What is the attrition rate of the employees, that Black minority employees that you have inside your organization? Are they leaving because they don't see anyone that looks like them in the higher ranks? Are people not coming to the company because of that? So you have to be very intentional and look at your numbers. I know we're moving, the topic of this is moving beyond the numbers, right? But the numbers play a very key role in your understanding of where your business resides at this moment. What does the executive team look like? We know that millennials make purchasing and career decisions based off of the corporation's diversity, their corporate and social responsibility. 66% of the millennials do that, purchasing based off of that. And then that same number also chooses who they're going to work for based off the diversity of an organization. If I don't see anyone who looks like me in an executive rank, how can I ever think that I could aspire to be at that level? some point in time, yeah, we have to be a trailblazer and make that happen. But the path is much easier when you already see somebody at that ranks, whether it be Black, LGBT, Hispanic, Asian, any of those things. And so I think we have to be very intentional about doing that. We've set up some HBCU internship program that we do every spring. So that was one of the things that we established this year. That has been wildly successful. So we were able to get at least one student from every HBCU in North Carolina, the 11 HBCUs, to be an intern at Lenovo. That was a huge opportunity for us to then introduce that talent pool to our leadership and get them to be into some of our program, like our laser program, which is our sales rotational program, or our developmental program for new employees who may be on the business side of things and not sales. So we have to be very intentional about making sure. And I keep using that word about intentional, but it is the focus that we have to be at.
I can speak to a few things. I love this question, and I have so many examples, but I won't give them all, but I'm just gonna share a few of my favorite ones. Similar to the HBCU program that you guys do, Jonathan, in 2019, we started the autism internship program at SAS. So we recruited folks with autism. We spent, maybe a month, talking with them and making sure that they were going to feel comfortable. And this is when we were still working in the office. We maybe put them in areas that weren't as loud, or the lighting was different. If they needed extended breaks, things like that, we made those things happen, and we ended up hiring about half of the interns that were accepted. Another thing that any size organization can do, and I know, Jonathan, you can probably speak to this more than me, but your employee resource groups, your EIGs, your ERGs, whatever you call them at your company, that can create such a culture of belonging for your employees. So we have several EIGs at SAS, and after George Floyd was murdered in May, about a month after that, our Black Initiatives group decided, okay, we're going to have weekly calls, Teams meetings, and these are going to be safe places. And what they decided to do was they took a documentary series called Seeing White. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but please listen to it if you haven't. I think it was, it aired in 2017. It was produced at Duke at the Center for Documentary Studies. And so we took two of those series to listen to beforehand, and then we went and talked about it every week. And the honesty and the emotion, and I can't even put to words how much that has kind of united us at SAS, to, as a white person, to feel like I can be an ally, and, I can go to the safe place and I can listen, I don't, and I can share my experiences too. To me, you can do that within your employee resource groups. It could just be those small things. We've even had executive leaders come into these meetings and speak, which has just been phenomenal. And I can't speak to that enough.
Yeah, so I think for us, it's interesting because I think when we think about sort of our scale and sort of where we are compared to sort of the organizations that Andrea and Jonathan are at, we're still sort of growing and finding our way on some of this. And I would tell you a big thing, if you're one of those organizations, you're a startup, if you're sort of small and still growing, this is, you think about all the things on the list of things that have to be done. It's not always been sort of top of that list, but I think the first thing you need to do is find a leader or someone that's in a leadership position in the organization that can sort of be the sponsor for this stuff, right? That can sort of have the passion that you have, because I will tell you a lot of the strides we've made is because we had that. And I will tell you, for example, having Annette and her position and that group, we haven't always had that. And so that came from leadership, right? Being passionate about minority business and having that. And so those are some of the things that we were able to sort of create. And we really have pushed sort of our hiring and making sure that we're prioritizing diversity in our hiring and everything that we do. We're doing a lot more in the same as sort of Andrea and Jonathan have talked about, the HBCU focused targeted recruiting. And also beyond that, we've created a diversity action committee, which will be focusing on both external and internal diversity efforts. And so, we continue to sort of learn our way, and you sort of have to take it, like you said, a journey, Jay, right? It's a journey for every organization, and it has to sort of fit where you are in your lifespan and sort of how your culture sort of works and what works for that culture, and how do you sort of get that stuff to work. So I think for us, we're still building our way, but I think we're taking the right steps. And and I think ever since Annette has come on, it's sort of really leapfrogged us. So we've really sort of really gone full force, because you have someone who that's their passion and their role, right? And so you need that to sort of really drive efforts moving forward. The other thing I'll tell you that we've done, coming in, we were very conservative in the way that we do our marketing. And so we've changed that more. We're trying to be much more multicultural. Like I said, we have much more Spanish language. We're increasing our efforts there, but just trying to also reflect in the marketing that you see the diversity of the folks makes a difference. And our supplier diversity efforts that Annette is leading have been huge. We have one of our biggest spends is on our media, and our media agency is a female-owned organization, and we're very proud of having that. And it does take some effort to get there, but I think it's important to sort of see diversity across everything that your organization does.
That's great. Thank you all for your comments. One of the things that unfortunately a lot of times with these initiatives, they do start grassroots. You do have leaders that will see the need and they'll step in, and then they'll assign somebody. I think we talked about, Andrew, I think you brought up the accountability, right? And then you got to start putting structure to it and everything else. And then that's when you start that intentional long journey of how you're going to do that. But, sometimes these things do have to start off grassroots. And, I've had a couple of comments that were sent to me in the chat and kind of around that notion as well. And particularly maybe even with some of the smaller companies, or if you don't have those resources internally, right? How do you find those advocates? Frank, I think what you're talking about is, if you can just find that one person who is at the leadership level that can help kind of be that champion for you and start to work towards, getting that highlighted in the organization is key. Like you said, finding somebody like Annette that can be that champion and take things forward in an organization. If you don't get that leadership at the top level, one of the things I've seen is that you can get stagnant. And then unfortunately that backfires because you have this grassroots campaign, right, of your employees saying, we want this. Jonathan, you touched on something I think that is around generations, right? One of the things that we look at is generations in the workplace. We do a lot of reverse mentoring and things like that, so that we can get them talking and excelling across an organization. But if you look at who's coming into companies, they are demanding that sustainability and that diversity. And that is a competitive advantage for companies who do have programs or are working towards that journey to increase their diversity and inclusion throughout their organization. So, I think all of that is so incredibly important. If you have to start at the grassroots, one thing I'd say is don't feel bad. That is where a lot of these have to start. But it is critical that if you are a leader on here and you are hearing that more and more, you really got to take it serious, or you are likely to experience turnover. You are likely to be at that competitive disadvantage when it comes to hiring. And if you try down the road, it's harder because you've already kind of built that negative brand out there. So definitely take it serious if you're hearing And if you are part of that grassroots movement, find advocates, find that one advocate that can help you out there. And if you don't have an ERG and you don't have these resources, there are community resources that are out there. I know a lot of large organizations are willing to have guests come to their ERG groups or their candid conversations. We do workshops, have them attend these types of things so that it can help kind of open that dialogue and that mindset. One thing, Andrea, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say about the grassroots effort. So our diversity and inclusion manager started out in recruiting and was not tasked with any of those things. And she's been there probably for 5 years. And she essentially worked from the bottom up. SAS is a pretty big company, but we didn't have a diversity and inclusion department 5 years ago. So this is not, so don't be discouraged. This is new for a lot of people. So it can start anywhere for sure.
That's right. I worked for the largest biotech company in the world, and we had a women's initiative, but we had nothing else when it came to diversity. And it all started off as grassroots, and then finally gained that momentum. And now it's one of the best diversity programs globally. That's award winning, but it had to start with a group of people saying, okay, what about us? What about these other areas of opportunity? Those areas of opportunity is what I do want to ask next, because we have some experts here. Frank, you touched on it around supplier diversity. So, how can the practice of supply chain management help support a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And Andrew, I'm gonna throw it to you. No offense, Jonathan. We'll get you to weigh in there too.
Well, first I'll just say, and I think anyone in supplier diversity experiences this on a daily basis, probably. Everyone thinks that we're DE&I, diversity and inclusion. We're supplier diversity. So, but now you're seeing our two programs kind of meld together. So with supply chain management, when you have supplier diversity, when you are actively working to grow, mentor, meet diverse businesses, you're going to have a competitive advantage. And on top of that, I can't tell you how many things that we couldn't even bid on as a company if we're not including diverse suppliers. When we go out for business, when we're doing RFPs, there are requirements. Companies are we're holding each other accountable now. You've got to put diverse suppliers in the mix if you want to play in the game. And also, a lot of times we get so many new ideas from diverse suppliers. They help us solve problems. Sometimes the smaller, more agile companies are the ones that are going to excel you in certain areas. And then when you're using the same supplier over and over, there's a stagnation that occurs. There's not a lot of new thought or, new activity around what could we do? How could we do this better? So that's just a little bit about how supplier diversity, helps change the culture of the company. And then, you've got employees, our employees see the diverse suppliers that we work with that come on campus or that help us with projects. It just fuels the community, the culture of, this is how we do business. We want to show diversity throughout the whole culture of the company.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Andrea said. Like she is so on point with how supply diversity does affect so many different areas inside the corporation, right? Let's think about what Hackett said, right? Hackett did a study, and they said if a company allocates 20% of their spend to diverse suppliers, you can attribute 10 to 15% of your annual sales to the supply diversity program. So for $1 billion company, that's a lot of money, right? We're talking a lot of money that can be attributed to the supply diversity program. Now that varies from organization to organization on how those numbers break down, right? So if if we can always tie that bottom line dollar back to supply diversity, corporations are always going to want to be involved with it, right? So if we take it a step further, if that 10 to 15% of annual sales or supply diversity, or 20%, I'm sorry, that 20% of spend with diverse suppliers, let's say 5% of that is happening in their backyard. All right, so Lenovo sits here in the RTP area. Let's say 5% of that diverse spend is allocated with diverse firms in North Carolina. Well, that increases the tax base, the pay, the the utilities pay, the infrastructure is able to be increased. And guess what? Those are same employees that recognize the benefit of doing business with a Lenovo, then turn around and be very loyal to Lenovo. They buy our products. So we want to keep that cyclical market going because we recognize supply diversity is key in building the economy. I think during President Obama's administration, they said, I think one of his main quotes was, small and diverse businesses are the growth engine of the US economy. And we know that majority of companies are small, and they hire majority people that look like them. We have so one of the great benefits Andrea and I both have, so we work, and I saw Pam up here too, Pam Gales. Hey, Pam. We all are a part of CVMSDC, which is the Carolina Virginia Supply Development Council. I sit as the corporate chair. Pam was the vice corporate chair on that one. And sorry, I got I didn't have my dog, but I got other things flying around me right now. And Andrea works as the secretary for both the Piedmont and Triad. So we keep her really busy, and she really it keeps all of us on point inside the organization. But one thing that we have recognized is the small and diverse businesses do a better job, and they can often do it for a better cost. So what employees see and what those millennials see based off of that corporate and social responsibility is us doing business with these small and diverse businesses that are saving us money, bringing us better innovation. And so now they're willing to buy into what we're offering into our, what we offer to the community as a whole. So I could talk about supply diversity all day. So I know we only have a few minutes.
It's great. I got to say that, I myself, so Pathfinder is a service disabled veteran-owned small business and a Black-owned business. Mm-hmm. And I knew a little bit about supplier diversity, but Jonathan, when you invited me to the conference, what was it, a week ago or 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. I learned a lot, because typically I'd always seen that when it was related to the government, right? And unfortunately, right now, I just attended a meeting with the government around supplier diversity and with SDVOSB set-asides and everything else. Their goal is 20%. They're at 1%. They're at 1% right now. And then, but they were saying, well, you look at some of the corporations that are out there that made statements but they still don't have diverse suppliers. And then I turned around and attended your meeting, and I was like, well, wait a minute. There are lots of organizations that are really leaning into that for the benefits that you talked about there. So for me, as part of my own education with that, it seems like we need to get that out more and more, because it is, again, it's, what if you look at the numbers of having a diverse organization versus a non-diverse organization, the numbers continue to go up when you look at different studies, but you can go and you can look at the McKinsey study, and they outperform every time. You look at those numbers, you think about the numbers that you just talked about right now, Jonathan. What business would not want to have that, right? But I think it goes back to what Frank was saying, where, there are some times where people say, I'm profitable. I think we have a great culture, and, things are great. Why make the change? I think when I think of the companies that I see out there that I work with and those that aren't leaning in, it's a journey. It's going to catch up at some point. You're going to have your, Dove moment, right? You're going to have, that moment at some point. And that's when you're going to say, oh, that competitive advantage that they were talking about before, I really missed the boat. And to unwind all of that just makes the journey a little tougher. So, listen, I love the conversations that we're having here. Annette, I want to just take a moment. I'm looking at the time to see if there's any questions that may have come up that people want to ask. before we start to wrap up the session?
Folks, feel free to chime in here. Mostly in the chat, it does appear that people have been agreeing with the comments and the remarks, and Andrea has shared a few resources there. So we do welcome folks to provide feedback or share any examples that you may have. I'll actually start off by just saying I agree with the comments, and especially around allies. And it's a great opportunity for me to thank the folks at the lottery who are supportive of embracing diversity efforts, and the allies, some of which who are on the call today. So, I want to thank them and say I'm super proud of being a part of those efforts and for having the allies that have been at the table with me over the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, Johnny, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to ask a quick question to the panelists. So this is more specific to recruitment of diverse employees. So I'll share my story, and this is why I think it's relevant. So my director at the time who hired me, she is now my mentor, one of my mentors. I dropped out of high school as a young man, and I actually went to trade school. I worked in the trade for 10 years. And when I met my director, she was looking to fill this role. And I remember she interviewed me and she said, Johnny, you don't check a single box from the job description, but you're bilingual and you come from the trade. I work for a large construction management company. And she said, let's give it a shot. So my question goes around, I know we do a lot, us personally as well, with HBCUs, which is awesome. And I think that's great that we're being intentional as corporations and large companies. But the question I have is there anything that anyone has done with some of our local diverse communities where you have high dropout rates, like someone like myself who had life challenges, and you don't make the smartest decisions sometimes as a young person. And unfortunately, some of our people that look like some of us here make some choices that take you down a path. So my question is there anything we can do perhaps to be more intentional in working with local community colleges? Because I went to get my GED at a local community college. So is there something we could do perhaps to work with some of those folks if we're trying to help the socioeconomics of some of our diverse communities where we see these inequalities happen? Is there somewhere we can go perhaps not make our job descriptions as exclusive, because something as minor as a degree, maybe we have life experiences that we can fit this person. I mean, I'm going on 8 years, so hopefully I'm doing something okay because I'm going on 8 years now in this role. So, but I would have never been, I know that if she wasn't here and would have given me that shot, no one else here, as much as I love my coworkers, no one would have given me that shot. Yeah. So I think, is there anything anyone has done along those lines and working specifically with perhaps folks that have dropped out in diverse communities in our area?
So I will say, we haven't worked primarily with dropouts, right? Because my goal is to prevent you from dropping out. Let me get to you before that even happens, right? So one of the things that Lenovo has done, and I was a part of this organization when I was in high school, and I'm from Raleigh, went to Enloe, so I was a part of the Math Science Educational Network, MSEN pre-college program that's housed out of NC State University. So I went to school there. I went into a STEM education, so I have a degree in civil engineering, and that was directly attributed to me being a part of MSEN program. So I take that, I gave you that backstory to tell you. So Lenovo, me being have oversight of the US ERGs, one of the things that we propose is that each ERG have employee resource group finds an organization which they will support. So I propose that we support MSEN because we wanted to be STEM focused. Well, we went through a grant funding round application. We won the highest grant amount for that organization, and MSEN pre-college program will now be our sponsored organization that we will not only support financially, but from a human capital aspect as well, trying to get to those students before they even think about dropping out, right? Because we can show them that people that look like you and I, Johnny, then we know, right, that they recognize they have a path, and that you are going to be that mentor because you know the journey that you took. So I would always say, reach back, be that mentor. I was on a call yesterday, and one of my colleagues said, we were doing an interview for MSc in pre-college program, and he said his mentor told him, never forget you owe.
Mm-hmm.
You owe. And I was like, wow, I owe too, right? I always looked at it as paying for it, but I owe those kids behind me the opportunity, because let's just be honest, you and I, people like us, we don't have that opportunity for failure. We have to be twice as good. That's what our parents taught us, right? So if we're not stepping up and being twice as good, they're not going to give someone else another shot at this opportunity. If you mess up, I want to say another word, but I'm not going to do it because we're a Christian group around here. That if you mess up, somebody's not going to get that next opportunity, and I have to be vigilant and keep my focus on making sure that I trail this blaze so that anybody comes behind us. It's the same thing with diverse suppliers. The diverse suppliers have to step up, do an excellent job for the corporations, because that way, one, they keep the business, they'll get more business, and they open the door for more people to come in and do business with us.
Johnny, one thing that you kind of bring up is a challenge that we often face when we work with some of our clients, and that is, kind of getting your shift away from the traditional, right? Where the job description says, you must have X amount of years of this, college, this, and that, and start to look at those transferable skills. And I've had some clients that have really moved the needle in that area to the point where they're working with prison reform. People that have jail sentences for misdemeanors and things like that, really giving them understanding, we need a second chance, right? Think about the large population of minorities, in the system, right? Looking at people who have a high school degree or a GED, but they've got transferable skills, which is kind of the example that you gave, right? To go into an organization. I mean, if you start to really peel back diversity, it's not what you see, it's not what you hear, it's not those things that we can mark down on a piece of paper. It's having that life experience. I'm a veteran. One of the things that, often we'll see is veterans are often overlooked in a lot of organizations. They'll say, hey, thank you for your service, go work in the warehouse. And you're like, buddy, I ran basically the equivalent of a small business with a multi-billion-dollar budget, and people and their families utilize me, right? But it's sometimes moving that mindset of an organization to think about those transferable skills. It's scary for them because they like that piece of paper that has all that stuff that it said for the last 30, 40 years on it. But it's a mindset. And if we can get that mindset to change, then I think we can do a better job of, giving the Johnnies out there that phenomenal opportunity, because then you're in a position, right? We always talk about privilege. Well, now we're in a privileged position to Jonathan's point, pay it forward and pay it back. And that's a great place to start. So appreciate that question. I know I just look, we're out of time. Annette, so do you want to bring us home and close it up here?
Absolutely. I'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Jay, for doing such a fine job of moderating this panel. I hope folks will follow you on LinkedIn and go to your website and get to know more about the special initiatives that you support with companies around diversity. Also to our panelists, thank you for the insight you've provided. I've been receiving some really good feedback from folks who just know other ways to contact me kind of directly as well in the chat. And you've provided a tremendous amount of insight for us all to follow. So I do appreciate all the work you're doing in your organizations and in these associations we're all connected to, and in the community as well. So thank you for being here. And I hope folks will all look you all up as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay, for leading the conversation.
My pleasure. And again, thank you to the NC Education Lottery for sponsoring this. I truly appreciate it. We came with a mission to try to get this out, practical stories, practical best practices out to the communities. We wouldn't be able to do it on our own. So thank you so much, Andrea, Jonathan, Frank, Annette. Thank you so much for being a part of the discussion of the panel. And thanks for everybody who took the time. I know that we're doing this during lunch. Thanks for taking that hour out of your time. If you need to get in touch with me or anybody else, I put my contact information out there. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I'm very passionate about this. So thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.